right, so how many of you have ever read chapter 27 of Acts? Okay. It's one of those things, that was my response too, was, sure, I have. But, reading it in slow-mo, right, it's like, I don't think I've ever read this thing, like this. How many sermons have I heard on this? I don't think I've ever heard any sermons on this. And I think a lot of it is that this is the kind of chapter that is just a lot of facts. It's like a journal, if you will, right? We're just going to read through the journal and so what, kind of thing here. So I am having the challenge of how to organize this, whether we just read all of 27 as a story, and then we slowly go right back and start chopping it apart.
One thing that came to me when I was reading it was how the Bible was really real because it's naming places and names. And that stuck out to me like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I was constantly, when I'd see a name and a word, I'm over here on Google going, so what is that? What is that? What is that? Kind of stuff. And they're saying things like, and that is here today. You can go to site and actually visit that place and be there. So it's kind of an interesting things. The ship that they talk about, you can see them in museums today. Those kinds of things. So there is a lot of history being referenced in all of this. So
I think one of the reasons too, if you go all the way back even to the Gospel of Luke, the reason why Luke wrote it was he wrote to Theophilus, right? And Theophilus, the reason he wrote it to Theophilus was to give basically the facts of what he had been taught, the stories that he had heard, what he had been relayed to him. And Luke laid out all of these factual things for him to give a foundation or a structure for his faith.
I see.
That's why we see so many details in the Gospel of Luke. And I think this is kind of a continuation of that, is it actually says, hey, you've been told these stories, you've been told these accounts, let me tell you some of the facts behind what that all is about.
All right. So what I think I'm going to do is we're just going to read 1 through 9 is really what we're going to read. That's 27, 1 through 9. And then just talk about that. I think there's enough of a chunk of stuff there to cover our time for that. As we get into this, it's helpful, I think, to understand where we came from in order to make a running start into chapter 27. In that he had just really did the final trial. Remember, we had the trial of Festus, Felix, and Agrippa, and now we're finally, after all that, he's heading towards Jerusalem. Heading towards Rome. Do you think this was a surprise to Paul to head to Rome? So we see it in Acts several times, Acts 19-ish, and there he says, I'm going to go to all these places. I'm first going to want to go to Jerusalem, and then I'm heading to Rome. And he said that then. Remember the vision that he had with Jesus a couple chapters after that, where Jesus said, you're doing a great job, Paul, but you are going to go to Rome, and you're going to, do that and suffer many things.
Even when a lot of his friends said don't go.
Yeah, he constantly kept saying, especially he kept saying, don't go to Jerusalem.
Well, that's it. Rome.
Right. Well, we have hindsight looking at Rome was not the good place to go.
Yeah.
But for him, it was like, if I want to spread the gospel here in the United States, where is the most effective place to go to do that? And one's minds might think Washington, D.C. We'll start from the top, if I may, and work, and do it that way. So there was that kind of an idea. If you get to Rome, you can communicate to an entire world for the most part, because Rome was the world.
Well, if you read, I think the first chapter of Romans, Paul writes a letter to the Romans, and he says, I'm going to come to you in passing. He was going west. He was going to end up in Spain. He didn't think he was going to die.
Right.
He thought, if you read his letter in Rome, the way he starts it off, hey, I'm coming in passing to talk to you, fellowship. I'm heading to Spain. Paul was an apostle, but Paul was human.
Yeah.
He grappled with the same things we grapple with. He wasn't infallible. God's infallible. God works around our infallibility.
Yeah.
So I think we got to understand that. Sometimes we look at Paul as this, almost like this Greek god in a sense.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
not.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
human. He makes mistakes. He's mind process. God had a plan, but sometimes we think we know what God wants.
There's a Yiddish phrase that's common. Man makes plans and God laughs.
That's right. Amen.
It's the way that is. So Paul was making plans, and God's providence is, Paul, you're going to Rome. Oh, by the way, it's going to be in a prison ship.
Yeah.
But hey, you get a free ride. So, well, wait a minute, I didn't read the fine print on this one. Okay, so Acts 27, starting in verse 1, and it says, and when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they proceeded to deliver Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan battalion or cohort named Julius, and embarking in a Adramyttian ship, which was about to sail to the regions along the coast of Asia, we put out to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica. And the next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul with consideration and allowed him to go to his friends and receive care. And from there we put out to sea and sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because of the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed through the sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra of Lycia. And there the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy, and he put us aboard it. And when he had sailed slowly for a good many days, with difficulty, had arrived off of, Cydnus? Since the wind did not permit us to go further, we sailed under the shelter of Crete off of Salome. And with difficulty sailing past it, we came to a certain place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lycia. We'll stop there actually at 8. Okay, so a lot of little details and facts here. So I guess I should ask a question first to find the audience, right? Is who among you do sailing? Has anyone ever been actually on a sailboat?
A few times.
I've been on a couple, but I like going straight where I'm going, not the way sailboats go.
So motor sailing is the thing
Most
for
to get
me,
somewhere, it's
right?
not just to play around.
And it's usually on a Disney cruise, you know. I want to rough it. I want to rough it on a cruise, right? With it. So sail ships are one of those things that obviously have been around, you know, even before this time. And you would think that the technology of sailing would have been what we have today, other than the electronics, would have been the same back then. But oh no. The ships, they had no rudder to speak of. There is a rudder, but it was a tie-on piece of plank, and they would tie it on to rudder it. This ship only had 2 oars on it. The dimensions, I wrote them down. 180 feet of length of the ship. It was 180 feet long. Just think about how long is 180 feet. That's a lot of boat right there. Even big super yacht cruisers don't usually come up to those, unless you're talking Bill Gates kind of ships. 50 feet wide.
Wow.
Okay, that's bigger than a double wide mobile hull. I'm trying to relate it to my mind here. And here's the amazing thing: is 44 feet deep. The draft on that sucker, it's like, oh my God.
How could it even move?
Well, remember where they're at is the Mediterranean Sea, and the way the geography of the Mediterranean, all that area, it's land up high, coast, and then depth. So you'll have 200, 400 feet, 100 yards off of the coast. It's not like what we have here, where there's a gradual, slow rise up. This was super deep, and that also contributes to the weather. It contributes to all of the way the water moves and stuff like that. So also think they can't drive because their holes weren't shaped like what we call our holes, right? Where there's like a V shape that helps you guide into the water. These were pretty well flat rounded bottoms. So if you think about it, it's like if you ever played air hockey, and that little puck is just going wherever it wants to go. That was pretty much it. They depended on the wind to go where they're going to go, and the oar was for fine tuning. That's it. You know, it was just one oar to kind of get the ship moving. This huge, massive thing here. So when the wind blew, it went wherever the wind was going to blow it. And sometimes, you know, you think you're going to go sail straight. You could sail straight, but you're going this way. Okay, it is a mess of a ship. The sails themselves were squared, or technically rectangular. Usually a main mast is what they had, and you couldn't tack in the wind. They didn't have the understanding. Yeah, wind to wind, wind on wind, or whatever it's called, a straight.
I'm not sure about this era, but back in the Clipper days, the Saint Marie and all that, you know, if you saw a ship that had, like, when you think of the Mayflower, you know, it's got the sails, 3 or 4 cross layers, it's all, the ship is this way, the sails are all this way, that's for going coast to coast. If you saw sails that were in line with the thing, those travel up and down the coast.
Right, like this, right?
Yeah, because the way the wind blows.
Right.
Now, that may be more modern than in those days. I don't know.
Well, it was the invention of the triangle sail, for the most part, that allowed for tacking in the wind.
Right.
That you could then be able to play the game of getting, well, I can get a little bit of power. I can get a little bit of, this, and I'd have to go back and forth, travel, 15 times the length for where you're actually going distance, kind of thing. So that's the kind of ship that we're talking about. Another little factor I want you to read into this, but we didn't get to at the very end. How many people do you think were on board? So you got Paul, a couple prisoners, right? You would think, okay, maybe 20,
200 or 300?
276 people.
Yeah.
How much was the crew versus?
Well, this was the combined total. It says it down at the end
Yeah,
here.
but I'm wondering how much, there's a basic crew and then there's cargo.
Well, there's cargo
There's people
primarily and
cargo.
prisoners that were there. So I don't know. I don't know how much were the crew and the guards, right? You had a centurion, so
But
he
I
was
consider the
boss of
guards,
medicine.
well, it may not be, if the guards are there to handle the prisoners, to me, that's part of the cargo.
Yeah.
But if they're there to
Sure.
protect the ship from pirates.
Remember, it was a
then
merchant
part of the
ship
crew.
too.
Right.
So they had the business class people. It was, they're making money.
Right.
So
Right.
the Romans would pay him to transport, but it was a merchant ship.
Right.
It was a private entity. Then he would go ahead and have, like Howard wants to go, I want to go to Spain. Oh, I want to go to Rome. Well, come on, it's going to cost you $200. Okay. So
Right.
the combination we're talking about was 200 or 300 people with everything.
Right. Okay, so we're talking a lot of people, big bulky ship. I can't imagine the ship. As I think about this more. Okay, so we get here at the beginning. Then it says, and when it was decided that we should sail for Italy. Okay, so first of all, who decided? It wasn't the we.
Agrippa, right?
Right, Agrippa, right, because you read back in 32, the verse right before that, Agrippa said to Festus, this man might have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar. The implication is, therefore he's going to Caesar. That's that push there.
But it probably wasn't Agrippa who decided how to get there. He probably just turned to his,
It said,
whether it's centurion or
handle
whoever,
it,
saying,
handle it, right,
take him to this.
right, right, exactly,
Figure it out, don't give me the details, just get there.
yeah.
And then he found, either because there was openings on a ship or,
Right.
different routes to get there. He decided which way to go, interstate versus on road versus,
Well, and if you look at the map here, one would think, well, it's just a straight line. You can just go from here, straight over. It don't work that way. You've got to go with what's called the trade winds. And they were often, my understanding, this is around the fall and winter time. And as I understand it from sailing lore, that is the worst time to be sailing in the Mediterranean. Is that in the summertime and spring it's like beautiful and wonderful and everybody goes, and it's too many tourists at that point in time. But in the winter it's like little miniature hurricanes all over the place. It is not a very pleasant place to be. We're spoiled with the Gulf of Mexico and how calm it is when you compare it to the Mediterranean here.
Well, I think also being a merchant ship, these guys had other ports that they needed to stop in to drop off and pick up and drop off and pick up and drop. So they had, they had to make their money too. So it wasn't like Rome was their only destination.
That's correct. It was just while you're on your way to, and the intention is that
Right.
they're going to change ships.
Yes.
With it. I actually, okay, so anyways, Agrippa was the one that decided, and there's this phrase that we should sail for Italy. Who's the we? You got a mouse in your pocket?
Right.
Who is this we?
So Luke was with them.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
So Luke was with them.
Yeah, it's Luke now.
Luke.
Anytime you say that phrase, we,
Right.
that's the author, we being.
But I don't think it was his decision.
No, then that's why I'm trying to divide this out. The decision was someone else's.
Right.
We decided to sail. So, being that, what's the best way for us to get there is that. Now, I know it's a little confusing because it sounds like, well, wouldn't the centurion make the decision of the logistics
Yeah.
of that? That's a yes and a no. You know, it's like we all grouped together and we made this corporate decision what's the best place. Best way. And really there wasn't a lot of options. You look at the maps, the walking distance, travel distance, I mean, there was no Amtrak, no Jerusalem to Rome.
There was no itinerary.
No.
You went from port to port to
You went to
port
port to port.
You got
And-
one port and then figured out, okay, how do we get
Yeah.
a little further
Yeah.
west?
And how do we get there? I mean,
Yeah.
it's that kind of stuff. And they didn't go that far offshore.
You know, they got a little map here showing they almost hugged the coast.
Yeah,
the
they
whole
had
time.
to hug the coast.
Stopping everywhere.
Yeah, they were going against the winds. It was an awful
And they
thing.
would use the coast to block some of the winds.
Yes.
Stay closer.
Yeah, it's called the leeward
Winds
of
out
the
there.
island is what they would do.
They would
Right,
block them.
right. Everything I know about sailing is from YouTube. So what do I know? Okay?
Must be right.
That's all I know about that. That we should sail, for they proceeded to deliver Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augusta. So the centurion, what's significant about us being referenced as a centurion?
Got 100 men.
He's got, in theory, he commands 100 men, right?
Yes.
Yeah, not necessarily that there's 100 guys always following him,
Right.
kind of thing, right? But that he's got in charge of that. So
Authority.
his authority. What are, in the New Testament, centurion, almost every time that I know of that they reference the centurion, it's with some respect. I mean, even the Bible refers to him with respect. The centurion that went to Jesus when his child was sick, right? Jesus commented about his faith because he said, Jesus, you don't even have to come. I just know if you speak the words, my child will be healed. And Jesus remarked, there's no one even in all of Israel that has as much faith as you've shown here. So great respect there. What are some other centurions? At the cross,
Yeah.
right? He said, surely this man really must be the Son of God. Right? Okay. We see, is it Cornelius? The centurion Cornelius?
The jail, the jail.
Yeah, the jailer, right? Yeah, that's what it was, yeah. So always, it's a significant thing, and I'm sure Luke is making sure we had a high authority, well-respected soldier here. Unlike the politicians of Rome at the time that were corrupt and that kind of stuff, there was a high regard for these quality of men of Rome. And these were top-notch guys.
Is that vehicle?
Yeah, he came earlier this morning that way, so now he's going this way. And his name was, centurion's name is? Julius, very common name, as I understand it. Okay. And embarking in man, I've been trying to practice this word for days. A Dromatian. Okay. And that is not a necessarily a style of ship. It is where the ship was built or ported from. Okay. It's a place, and that is.
Like saying a Bollinger ship or a Avondale ship. Or
Yeah,
something.
it's from where it hence comes from, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Kinda
It
see
does
that-
imply.
You kind of see that today, right?
Yeah.
Ships that have
Where the registry.
registry's from, right? Or you'll, yeah. So I don't know why Norwegian has so many ships. I don't know. Anyways, which was about to sail to the regions along the coast. So about to sail, right? So this is part of the owner of the sailing vessel's route. They're not taking a special new route to get there. They just have to take whatever's there for them. The region along the coast of Asia, and that's the catch there, along the coast of Asia, as you saw on the map. We put out to sea accompanied by, Aristarchus. Yeah, thanks. And this is another traveling companion. So one of the commentaries mentioned, which I guess I never even thought about it. Prisoners don't normally have traveling companions that aren't the prisoner. But this guy and Luke are traveling companions of Paul.
Right.
So Paul was being treated well, special, unique, right?
Well, he was Roman.
He was Roman.
But I'm not disagreeing with you, but I can see it because in some, I think, it's not with any certainty, when you were in prison, you were just locked up. They didn't supply 3 squares and a cot, or anything like that necessarily. Your family had to feed you. I say family, friends, whatever. And so when you went into prison, your family brought you food. And I'm wondering if this is similar. I've always thought this might have been similar where, all right, someone's got to take care of you. I'm not going to do it because I'm just dragging your chain ball with me to wherever, and you're attached to it. So if you want to be fed, you better get your houseboy.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm making that up a little bit, but I can see it.
I can't imagine the complete system is you go into jail, and if you don't have anybody, you starve to death. And so your penalty to go to jail is death.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's some process.
Just basic care.
Yeah, the basic care.
But
If you want more of, again, he's right because it's Roman, but then you're right because Paul, because of his friendships, was given privileges, and if you keep reading, receive care. Well, he got above and beyond because of his friends. Right. So you get the basic care for the average prisoner, and
right.
Paul's got friends with Luke and everything. So because of his respect, I guess the guy
But they were allowed to bring in,
allowed to take care
come
of
and
him.
go, I assume, to go
Exactly,
get food.
exactly. So you got to kind of, and which is in the scripture, you just got to read into it. That's because we don't get a total play-by-play.
Right.
But if you keep reading, it says receive care once he got into the port. Well, obviously he had friends everywhere around.
Well, the other thing we got to remember is Paul broke no Roman law.
Nope, that's right. He wasn't found guilty.
The only reason why he's going there is because he has to
He
go.
has to go.
Yeah.
So it's not like he had broken any law, anything, to be forced to.
Well, they didn't know that yet.
Oh, no,
It hadn't been.
no, they, I think it's been determined.
Yeah, 3 trials later, they
Well, they said that if it wasn't because he claimed, because early in the process he said, I want a lawyer, so to speak, that said, or he had to go to Rome. But all the other guys couldn't figure out where the crime was, but he still could have been executed under Roman law. But Festus and
No, because he appealed to Caesar. No, when he appealed to Caesar as a Roman citizen, Festus could have, but Festus would be on a chopping block.
That's my point. Had he not,
Yeah.
he would have probably
Right.
been released. But since he appealed to Caesar, it's like on hold. You're not innocent yet because you said you got to take the charges.
Who knows? He could have, if he didn't appeal to Caesar, he could have been killed by the Jews. Again, there's a lot of variables.
Yeah, I realize it's a.
But once he appealed to
But
Caesar,
your comment that he hadn't broken any law. I mean, it's
Had
very
broken
similar
any
to
Roman law.
Roman law.
Yes.
You can say the same thing about this Trump thing. I'm not trying to get into politics, but a lot of people say he never broke any laws, and the misdemeanor got to a felony. All that. It's so sort of he's still in the court system. So until they pronounce judgment or whatever the term is, he's still accused. So Paul is still accused, so he hasn't been cleared or convicted yet. He's in that.
well, Trump has been convicted, according, and you can call it whatever you want, but he has been convicted. Paul hasn't been convicted at all. Paul appealed to
Well,
Caesar.
now, but
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're
prior
going to
to
go over
this
the
last week or
process.
2 weeks ago.
Whether you agree or not, he was convicted. So
That
Paul was
centurion, was it good. He happens to have a good centurion on this ship with him. And the way the prisoner probably handled himself would determine we're gonna keep this guy or, you know, his demeanor and all, that might have had a play in it.
Oh, definitely.
So look at verse 3 real quick. And the next day we put in at Sidon, so they ported at this next port. And Julius treated Paul with consideration and interesting, and allowed him to go to his friends and receive care at Sidon.
And that was on shore.
It's on shore.
He landed on
That's
shore.
right.
Yeah,
So he's trusting him.
because Paul probably had a church started there.
Well, he also had been under house arrest up to the other,
And it makes me wonder. Remember a few verses up in the previous chapter, it talks about he talks about his chains, and he raises his chains to show me I've got chains on.
Yeah.
Did he still have chains even? You know,
Good question.
I don't know if he walked around with chains on his wrist. I just
but what I thought was interesting on that verse is, and receive care. You remember back to his thorn in the flesh? The biblical scholars have said that they think that it could have been epilepsy, could have been, I forget what the other one was, and then also something with the eyes, you know, some sort of eye problem.
Yep.
And to me, the receive care was not just, oh, go get a good meal and visit with your friends. It wasn't that.
Well, mine says to refresh himself.
Oh, okay, well, mine says receive care, and I took that as a medical thing. That's what medical means.
Right, it says here just to refresh
You
himself.
know, to get him,
Go take a shower.
Yeah.
well, it could be
You'd be on a boat with all these guys for whatever time.
But, you know, but either way, it was, I think he did it for Paul's benefit.
Oh my God, I don't think there's any doubt.
But it may have been more of a medical thing. Yeah, go get your sores, you know, treated and.
Yep. And 4, and from there we put out to sea and sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because of the winds were contrary. Under the shelter, that is a very common nautical method, is knowing that the what's called the leeward side of an island will not have as much wind and waves, which is really more important than anything else, because it is absolutely miserable being shaken and stirred, you know, this kind of thing, because it's not just one way, it's like all directions here. And islands usually do that, and there's lots of, if you ever zoom in the Mediterranean, it is not as plain as you see in our maps here, like landmass, no, and then it's just no lands. There are thousands of islands all over the place. They're dotted everywhere. You pretty much, you can go from island to island by seeing each island. That's how close they were. So that's 20, 30 miles on your horizon view there. So they go. That's what it means by going under the shelter, not under the military protection or anything like that, but rather by weather protection. And like the understatement of the winds were contrary. It's like they weren't for us here.
Yeah, my version says the winds were against us.
Against us, right? Yeah. And when we had sailed through the sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. Okay. So going from port to port to port is what they're doing. And hoping to go with it. And the centurion found an Alexandrian ship that's sailing for Italy, and he put us aboard it. So here's crew change, right? Is what's going on here. So this Alexandrian ship was going to Alexandria or coming from Alexandria?
Well,
It was just built there.
would it be, or is that just where, like you say, where it was built?
Where's Bill? I don't know.
Yeah, it says they were sailing for Italy.
Yeah.
So they were going to Italy, that's why they put them on that ship.
Yeah, the ship they were on was now going to be going a different route, and so they changed ships so that they'd still go where they were trying to get to.
But I don't know if it was instead of going to or from Alexandria itself.
Yeah,
It may have been just, in our terminology today, an Alexandrian flagship.
right.
We could go anywhere we want.
Well, Alexandria is closer to Egypt, right? And I knew that Rome, from what I understand, for various reasons why I know this, is that Rome and Egypt had contracts for grain and wheat. Mostly, almost all the wheat came from Alexandria and Egypt area. So this is a ship that's laden with wheat going up to Rome. Okay. And the reason why they changed ships, accommodations were poor.
Maybe this ship didn't have to stop in other ports.
All the other places,
That
maybe?
wrong.
Maybe so.
Maybe its wheel fell off.
Maybe its wheel fell off. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know the why, but
Well, it could be that certain ships and captains only traveled certain.
so distant
Right,
from
like
the
in the river, they have river pilots that go from here to there, and then they know that part of the river, and then the next part is someone else's responsibility.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a guess.
The reason they got on the first ship that they were on was probably because it was going in that direction, but now it's not gonna be going in our direction.
Right.
Takes another one.
I guess maybe I'm spoiled with my travels is that not normally I can get from point A to point B pretty straightforward. And sometimes with airlines, you got to go to A, then B, then C, then D. You hop through it. But this feels like they're like, okay, we got to here. Now let's decide what to do here. We got to here, and now let's decide how we're going to go further. It just feels very unplanned to me.
To me, it's not, because you have the trade ships that go up and down that eastern coast. I'm not sure if there's a name for it. And then now they're going straight west through to Italy. It's relatively straight.
Yeah, I understand what you're
But that's a different type of ship. The sails are different.
Yeah.
And so, first you gotta go to the hub, you gotta go to Dallas to get to anywhere else or wherever, And I think that's kind of, they're just going to Amsterdam, then they can get into where they want to in Europe.
I came in from London to Miami, and since I'm coming right here, we went to Tennessee, and then here.
Right.
Same type of thing.
But think about our travel now is we pre-booked the whole
I
plane
know,
from
the
here,
whole thing.
from here to Rome. It's
And-
already pre-booked.
and that's-
There, you can't, I can get a ticket from here to there. When I get there, then I'll have to figure out the next,
Exactly.
purchase my next.
Ticket, if you will.
Ticket,
Right,
right.
yeah.
You said how much trouble he had in sailing. So what could have been a 3-day journey, maybe took him 3 weeks. Whatever, I don't quote me on the
Well,
days.
you imagine that.
So you can't book that far in advance.
Well,
Even if you could.
And you mean there wasn't computers back then?
Yeah.
We gotta kind of go back in
That's
time,
right.
y'all. It was
Yeah.
like, to us, it's like, I can't believe it. To them,
I know.
it's like, no, this is life.
Yeah, this is life,
So we
right.
gotta, we gotta live
And
this
so the
life.
timelines are not like, in a week we get there. It's like, it could be a week that the ship shows up, the next one,
Yep.
or not.
Yeah, because the way the weather, we're talking about that time of the season with the
Right.
weather, we don't even know if there's a ship there sailing yet or not. It could be, it
You
could have
have
got
to-
wrecked. even.
You have to
Who
wait
knows?
6 to 8 weeks in a town.
Right, that's exactly what it was. You go to a port, and the port says, okay, any ships coming in, they got it all on record, yeah, guy from Alexandria's
Yeah,
coming in.
it's supposed
I
to
mean,
be coming in
actually, it's pretty
whenever it
legit,
gets
when you
here.
think about it. They had it down to a science for back then.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's so
That
what we
we all
look
get
at as a
ours.
mind boggling. Remember, this was 2,000 years ago. It's pretty good. There was always ships going here and there. We just got to say that was their way of life, and they understood it. Which, if you
We
keep reading
do.
when Paul says we shouldn't sail, well,
Yeah.
the heck with you, Paul. We're gonna sail. Well,
Yeah.
come to find out, we should have wintered in,
Big
like most
boo-boo,
people
right.
would have
Yeah,
done. So,
no, yeah.
you know,
And Paul doesn't fail to mention that. I told you
yeah,
so.
yeah.
All right, we have got to stop here with it, so, yeah, we're gonna stop here. Okay. But I did want to ask the one question. So what's the application? This is a lot of facts. So what is the application so far?
Well,
What are we learning?
We making decisions and we're doing things and we think that we're having this happen, but yet in doing that, God's plan still works out, even though it's like you don't see it maybe because you're making the decisions, but yet it's still his will gets done.
Yeah, that's that word that we've been talking about called providence. God's providence is still there. It's the general guiding force, and we're just zigzagging around. We're tacking left and right. If I can use that term.
Or is there an application? I mean, I look
Is
at
there
it,
an application?
when you started, I'd like, look, we gotta say, to me, the book of Acts, and I love what you said about Luke, even the Gospel of Luke, it substantiates the Bible. It's there to confirm. So application is confirming the Word of God. Not necessarily, well, this is, okay, I get it, but really, if you read this whole story, it's a great documentary. Look, Paul did this, and can we find it on the, oh, yes. So I think it confirms our faith or reaffirms our faith. So
It is always risky that when we take historical and
Yes.
try to apply a spiritual
Yes.
Right.
to it.
Yes.
But at the exact same time, I am reminded in 2 Timothy 3:16, it says, all scripture is inspired by God and is there for reproof and training and correction in righteousness. That's what all scripture is. So we may have to take it as a whole
Yeah.
to say, yes, this is confirming what's
Yeah.
written here. And that is encouraging to me to know
That's-
there are facts that
That's
that
what
are
I'm.
true.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. It's
Right.
not, you can't apply, but it's like it's.
It's not
a
like
truth.
saying, the
Yes.
Lord now has told us we always
Right.
have to go sailing.
Yeah, no.
You know, that kind of stuff.
That is the application of what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Yeah,
not-
it's just-
that
once
is
upon
just-
a time, this
right.
is, I can,
Right.
can corroborate
Yeah,
why things are happening in the way they happen.
Right.
yeah,
If you don't have
exactly.
a blind faith, huh?
Right.
It's proven.
Right.
Right.
It's grounded in God's word,
Right.
not faith.
Right. And did like Paul, was Paul read? Well, it was the only way to find out. You get books like this, so let's go read.
Right.
Let's go over his steps. Oh God, this is Luke did a great job. So it kind of reaffirms our faith because everybody says you have blind faith. No, we don't.
Right, no.
The only blind faith we have, in a sense, is the resurrection, death and resurrection, because we weren't there. It's been documented. But that, if you want to, okay, yeah, I get it. But everybody, whether you're an atheist or wherever, you some point, that's why they call it faith.
Right, right.
So we got to put that in perspective too.
A few verses back from that talks about, Paul says, I am not out of my mind.
Yes.
I am sober and rational.
That's right.
With
That's
it.
right.
So that's what we see here. So there's an application right there. All right. What are you guys praying for?